Esoterinerd podcast, episode 67, in which Joe Shantz and I interview Frater Barrabbas. Now, if you heard another episode 67 prior to this one, that fell into the memory hole, which I'll get into a little bit later when we talk to Joe. But first, the REAL Rosenkreuz Orden. Now, obviously we're talking about the real Rosicrucian order, as opposed to the sort of cartoon bad guy Ebenezer Scrooge authoritarian, hierarchical, and money-grubbing, copyright-waving, sue-happy manifestation of false Rosicrucians known as Amorc. For more on that, check out episode 28. It's a real shame. Anyway, let's get back to the story of our founder, Father Christian Rosenkreuz. The same song was also sung to him by other nations, the which moved him the more because it happened to him contrary to his expectation, being then ready bountifully to impart all his arts and secrets to the learned, if they would have but undertaken to write the true and infallible axiomata out of all faculties, sciences and arts, and whole nature, as that which he knew would direct them, like a globe or circle, to the only middle point and centrum, and, as it is usual among the Arabians, it should only serve to the wise and learned for a rule. That also there might be a society in Europe which might have gold, silver, and precious stones sufficient for to bestow them on kings for their necessary uses and lawful purposes, with which such as be governors might be brought up, for to learn all that which God hath suffered man to know, and hereby to be enabled in all times of need to give their counsel unto those that seek it, like the heathen oracles. Verily, we must confess that the world in those days was already big with those great commotions, laboring to be delivered of them, and did bring forth painful, worthy men, who break with all force through darkness and barbarism, and left us who succeed to follow them. And assuredly, they have been the uppermost point in Tiragono Igneo, whose flame now should be more and more brighter, and shall undoubtedly give to the world the last light. With thanks to Akito Nakatsuka for composing the music to The Adventures of Link, or in this case, Father CRC. Thank you also to Anonymous for posting the Fama Fraternitatis all over Europe in the early 17th century. Thank you also to Frater IT for reciting the Fama Fraternitatis for the Esoterinerd podcast in the original German. Next, the secret of the golden flower. And picking up right where we left off in episode 65. The work on circulation of the light depends entirely on the backward flowing movement, so that the thoughts, the place of heavenly consciousness, the heavenly heart, are gathered together. The heavenly heart lies between sun and moon, i.e., between the two eyes. The book of the Yellow Castle says, "In the square-inch field of the square-foot house, life can be regulated. The square-foot house is the face. The square-inch field in the face. What could that be other than the heavenly heart? In the middle of the square inch dwells the splendor. In the purple hall of the city of jade dwells the God of utmost emptiness and life. The Confucians call it the center of emptiness. The Buddhists, the terrace of the living. The Taoists, the ancestral land, or the yellow castle, or the dark pass, or the space of former heaven. The heavenly heart is like the dwelling place. The light is the master. Therefore, when the light circulates, the energies of the whole body appear before its throne, as when a holy king has established the capital and has laid down the fundamental rules of order, all the states approach with tribute, or as when the master is quiet and calm, men servants and maids obey his orders of their own accord, and each does his work. Our guest tonight is an author, witch, practitioner of ritual magic, past member of the OTO, Gnostic bishop, and founder of the Order of the Gnostic Star. He is also a musician, an artist, and a ritual ordeal craftmaster. But first, let's bring in our co-host, Joe Shantz.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm actually really excited about this event. I invited you to it. It's the Insane Clown Posse with Smash Mouth, hosted by Guy Fieri at Cracker Barrel Old Country Store in Morton, Illinois, sponsored by Elevate Church.
Ah, what? What is the nature of Elevate Church's philosophy?
I don't know, but I love the mix. So
Yeah.
It's Cracker Barrel Flavor Town.
Nice. Oh, these churches. Just these particular ones. Like
But
the
not
one
ones that sponsor Insane Clown Posse and Guy Fieri at Cracker Barrel.
Insane Clown Posse. Now, I know I should know these guys. This is where it'd be really useful if Janie were here. Do they have any?
It's not a real event. It's a spoof event, but I think it's hysterical.
Oh, good. Okay, yeah. I'm so gullible. It just goes right over my head.
It's good. So I'm excited about tonight. I really just reading this guy's blogs. I think that I definitely share a lot of the same interests and some of the same philosophies, and it's just I think that the cool thing. I'm probably going to restate this, so it's stupid to say it now because I should save it, but I'm just so excited because people certain orders just go on and on about lineage and how important that is, and I think that it does add value, but this guy made his forged his own way, having nothing, which I think is really, really cool.
Nice.
It just shows a lot of dedication to the art.
Yeah. That's great. That's a perfect guest for, the spirit of what I'm all about with this podcast, helping out the solo practitioners who maybe are a little overwhelmed and, by the daunting task of taking all these books and internalizing them and making a practice out of it. But, we can give a nice human face to people who've done that. And I mean, I can't really tell people how to do that. All I can really say is, don't go that way. Never go that way.
Awesome.
And
You
tell
know,
some
it's
fun
like,
stories, but
well, like Scarlett Magdalene, who we had on the show a while back, like, her doing the Abramlin work.
yeah.
She gets criticized like ridiculously for, doing kind of like some things on her own. And I think that with any big giant process like that, it's like, even in the alchemical books, like the really old ones that are seen as canonical, there is a point where like they'll get you to the ledge and you see the other side of the ledge, but you got to figure out how to bridge that yourself. And that's all your own. That's all you. And, that's kind of the deal. And I think that, I think so many people are just like looking for the book that'll take them from, one step to the other. And like a system like the Golden Dawn does that to a certain extent. But once you kind of hit, even Portal or, and Portal to a lesser extent, because there are orders that have a very structured Portal kind of grade. But once you hit sort of adepthood, it's kind of like, okay, like the sky's the limit. Like you can do whatever you want, kind of.
Yeah. Now, okay, so at one point, when I got into Portal, all we got was this version of the Rosary that I did a couple episodes ago, and the Thoth invocation. That was basically it, and we were told, go do that. And then later they said, oh, and the opening by Watchtower. And then later there was, okay, SIRP, SBRP, of course, the script to the Portal itself, the Thoth invocation, and of course that includes what's it called? The invocation of the Bornless, not the. There's two.
I don't think we got that one until, like, I didn't get that one until
it's the one it's just that little paragraph at the ending of the night.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the Bornless ritual, but just it's called like the invocation of the higher self or something like that. And then, or the Bornless one, same diff, same, But so do you know of like another Portal curriculum? Because that's the extent of my knowledge of like how Portal is done ever.
I don't want to speak to. I don't know why I don't want to speak to it, but I think that there are,
maybe without naming the order,
one, where it's more about like structured meditation and like more about not only reading certain materials but then putting them into practice. But all around like mantra and meditation and things like that. So there can be a bit more structure, which I kind of think is important in that grade a little bit, because you can sort of get lost. Yeah. And actually, I guess in some ways it's kind of good to get lost, because that's going to be your experience.
I got lost, and I've been lost ever since. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Actually, I decided to just fall. Yeah, I'm just the fallen one. So yeah.
It's funny, they talk about as you're climbing, you're going to want to, there's some things that are going to want to fall away, and you just got to let them go, like, oh, gee, there goes reason. Oh, there goes my friends. Oh, there goes my family. Oh, no. Oh, there goes my, sense of agreement, reality, and what am I left with? A little cult. I'm left with these guys. Okay.
Although, it was really cool. Like, there were some really cool insights in being in that energy, just in that spirit place, because you really do start to like see how mutable your own ego can be. I mean, I remember I was like, I was really serious about, wow, I could actually go and be a hermit and just do nothing but meditation work all day long. And I was really serious about that. Like, I could literally do that.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of cool. So there were good things.
There were moments. I do paint. Sometimes I paint an overly sardonic dystopian picture of those 18 years of my life. But, of course there were enough good times that I stuck around. But
it was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Exactly. Well, I mean, and I was looking outside, like, well, what else is there? And I'm like looking at the truck stop, with crickets at night and a tumbleweed rolling by, and then I just like, okay, fuck this, and I go back into the temple. But I don't know. I should. I should have dug a little deeper and find out what was going on outside. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that show, Kimmy Schmidt. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's worth checking out. It's about it's the redhead from The Office. First of all, the American one. Well, anyway, she gets buried. Well, no, she doesn't get buried. She's in like a bunker with a cult leader and like a few other girls dressed like little girls from the Midwest or something in the 1800s, and they're down there for 15 years, and then the government, tracks them down and rescues them. So it's the story of her trying to be normal in New York after having been in a bunker in the Midwest for 15 years.
I mean, it's got to be kind of a cool experience if you think about it. I had a friend, one of my old jobs, who came over from Russia when it was still kind of behind the Iron Curtain, like where there still was an Iron Curtain,
Mm-hmm.
and so his family was Jewish, and they were basically, I don't know what the deal was, but they were kind of told, look, we're giving you an opportunity to leave, you should go. And so they went, and he said that the acclimation process was harder for people who went directly over to America, but his was, I think he went to France first and then went to America. But it was just like, he was just totally overwhelmed. It was like an alien world to him.
Wow.
And that must be a really cool experience in some respects, and being able to like have that in your back pocket to sort of use that when you're kind of going into alien worlds, like like meditation.
Yeah, that's true. Or even into some kind of social situation. I mean, I did get a lot of training for interpersonal relations and how groups interact and what happens when things start splitting off, and I mean, there's a lot of really subtle lessons learned experiences that if I were to sit down and write them all out as though on a resume, that it might sound impressive. But so I mean, but I definitely don't know who Smash Mouth is.
But you know who Guy Fieri is.
Things. Guy Fieri. Now, was he married to Madonna at one point?
Yes, he was.
Oh my God, I got that. I got something.
He was married to Madonna, both her clone and her, at different times, though.
He wasn't really weird. I got it wrong, didn't I? Oh shit.
No, he's the Flavortown guy. He's like the big chef who's got all the big flavors, and I invited you on Facebook to the event. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Did you happen to catch my deleted episode?
No.
I went on this rant about this blog post this guy wrote about how great the LBRP is and how he's got the original one that doesn't have the evil Hebrew demons in it. But I went on for an hour and 9 minutes. I called him an anti-Semitic little shit. I said, fuck you, from the heart. I at one point, I told him to go look at his teeth in the bathroom because he's clearly on meth. And then I started like defending the Confederate flag in a mock Southern accent. And so in the end, I decided to take the episode down because it was just spiteful. It really was not a good...
See, I don't know why, but I find those people really hilarious. And I shouldn't be... Like, they're probably mentally ill.
Yeah, I know. That's why it's like, okay, I don't think it's PC to make fun of ignorant people who are so out of touch with reality they think that PC is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Is there a word for that? Is there a PC word for someone who's so out of touch they think PC is a bad thing? Because I need to know what it is, because I talk about those people a lot.
Yeah, I've really got no idea.
And they're probably half of them are half the people listening. You know, that's the weird thing is people get interested in esoterica straight out of a meth hallucination. Sometimes, like they go from zero to meth right into Golden Dawn. You know, and then I'm Proctor. You know.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, because you just look at. I think Crowley published it in 777. it was either that or like Sefer Sephiroth or something else that he did, where he did the correspondences with on the Tree of Life with various drugs. So I think that what happened, like I think that like I've never had meth before, but I'm sure you can like pop into the astral really quick if you're really like inclined to, if you already have some of those inclinations. I'm sure it can pop you in some sort of place where you're like, wow, I'm kind of like now seeing and experiencing something that I don't know about. So yeah, for sure. But it's kind of like I kind of like someone like Scarlett Magdalene, I'll bring her up again, because she was posting some things where she's like, I attract all these nut jobs, and it's like, well, yeah, but you go on all these forums and talk about stuff, and that's fine. Like that's I love the fact that you're as vocal as you are, but like I would never do that. Like I just can't, it's not my thing.
She's challenging, I have to admit, in a good way. And I mean,
in a really good way. No, I love that there are people out there with a voice like that, because she says a lot of the things.
I definitely don't agree with everything she says, but I think that she knows that, and I think that she doesn't agree with what I say, but I think that we still are okay. And that's cool. That's how things ought to be, right? Like people can have different points. Yeah. Like I don't think that that it's actually teleportation. I'm kind of with Blonde Milo Duquette on this side of whether it's all in your head. But are we still friends? Are we still cool? I mean, that's kind of my position.
Oh yeah. Well, things like that. Yeah, I'm, on some of the things that she talks about, I really don't have an opinion. So I'm just more curious about, I'm interested in her own. And I don't know, like I've just
she's like cheering. She's saying magic all the way, go all the way. Like don't limit yourself. Like she's wanting to break down the boundaries. When people say, well, magic isn't actually as real as they used to think it was. Like she's saying, why this revisionist thing? Why take the damage that Rigardi did and continue to damage it more? I mean, watering it down enough so that it can be digestible to people who are mostly skeptical and cynical, but a little bit into astrology, as opposed to like people who are ready to like jump off the deep end and do Abramelin work on their own or something like that.
Yeah, well, I think that I think it's a good mindset, even if you, at some point, if you think about like it from a chaos magician's perspective and say, okay, look, like I'm talking to you now and I don't believe that. Yeah. But when you're in the space, actually believing it,
it's
like
true.
1,000%.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, when I'm in the temple and I'm Hierophant, I literally am Osiris, and this literally is me that I'm looking at in front of me. But yeah, when I'm when I'm done and I take it off, like I can even talk some shit about the formula, but totally, yeah. It is kind of a mind job going back and forth. Mind job, mind fuck, job. What am I? I don't know what that is.
That's so sexual.
Yeah, I know. A mind job. You want to give me a mind job?
Yeah, my mind job's $5. That's me on the street corner. Hey, baby.
Losing my way.
Hey.
Speaking of which, let's see if Frater Barrabbas is available. 1 second.
I'll just jabber on. I just like so why did you end up like this guy who was clearly insane? Like what upset you?
Solus, the Sora from a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah.
She had forwarded me the link, and it was funny because I was driving, of course, and I'm not really focusing on the words, as I shouldn't while I'm driving. And so I'm like, well, it looks good to me. And so I was about to reply, yeah, it looks good to me, because I just like saw the beginning where it says the LBRP gets you in touch with your immortal nature. It's far more than just what people think it is. And I'm like, wow, yeah, I agree with this guy, And so then I got home and I looked it up and I read it, and I just was like, oh God, it just got worse and worse the more I read. And so, yeah, I just decided to do an episode about it, but it was yesterday, like on the, full moon, summer solstice, 110 degrees. And I'm sitting here just getting more and more fuming. And so then I just decided, like, wow, what if people like the Esoterinerd podcast to the point where they play it in front of their kids? you know, and then here I am like,
I don't recommend that.
yeah, I don't recommend it
That's
either,
me.
but
Whatever.
you know, I just started thinking like,
We
gosh,
just talked
you know,
about mind jobs.
what a
Sounds so dirty now.
what a
Now I feel
bastard I
dirty.
am. I got really
You
doing
know,
these dramatic things, you know.
I don't know. I finally got to a point. I don't know if this it relates to what you're saying or if it's totally the sideline. I'm kind of like going through like sleep deprivation, but I got to this weird place, and I don't know when it happened. I would like to know because I think it would be good to write a book about it. But I literally just about so many things these days. I just don't give a fuck,
Yeah.
and I think it's like I actually don't. You should never quote Pete Burns, but Pete Burns is like, you know what? I'm old enough and ugly enough to live within my truth, and I'm like, that's how I feel. Like it's like, you know what? Like what you're saying is bullshit. What you're saying is right on. I'm gonna like listen to that, and
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I've just gotten to that place where it's like, you know, I know where I want to seek wisdom from, and I go there, and I'm curious about other things, so I kind of listen to, but I kind of like smell bullshit with respect to myself, like a mile away. I'm just like, I'm
Yeah.
not going there,
Yeah.
just not doing it. It's weird too because I think like just in that process, I can smell other people's bullshit. Like when people are lying to me, I just get it more now. I think because I think in some ways I'm more truthful to myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. That was kind of what yeah, that's kind of like some of the I don't want to misuse the term gypsy. Some of the con man kind of tactics, is to like use people's ego weaknesses against them, like to find someone's flaws and weaknesses and the lies that they tell themselves, and then start to agree with those lies that they tell themselves, and then embellish upon them, and then before you know it, you got the person doing your bidding.
You know what's funny though? Like I totally keto that shit away. It's sort of like if someone mentioned something about like, hair out of place or something, like, oh yeah, you should have seen me earlier, or like I'll be even more self-deprecating, but
Yeah,
like laugh about it,
yeah.
like, and that totally
Pull them the
banishes it.
direction they're already going.
Right? It's like,
Yeah,
oh no, yeah, I'm totally ugly. Like what the
yeah,
hell, Like,
yeah. I know. It's sometimes it's on the level of like micro expressions, because I work at a gym, so you can imagine I get like a few very muscular people kind of sizing me up with my man bun and my tie dye and my mustache on my way to teach yoga, you know, and and so I smile back, and then I keto it. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of why I'm like continuing to go further in this direction. It's like, okay, well, this seems to be working for me. I'll just be the
I
wacky
have,
hippie guy.
yeah, and have fun with it. Like even be like more hippie than you are.
Yeah, totally.
Um, Oh, I've got to tell you a funny yoga story. So there was this guy. I'm sure this guy's in your class,
Mm,
or if not, he will probably show up at some point.
uh-huh.
Um, so I would be at the gym at like where I worked and stuff, and then this is back in San Francisco. So this guy like I would smell him before I saw him, and he would douse himself with patchouli, and 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 this dude, like, I God love him because he didn't give a fuck. He wore this like to work. Now this is like a work gym, so these are all people you work with and stuff.
Hmm.
This dude like wore this like spandex wrestling singlet to yoga that went down. It was like a fetishistic wrestling singlet as well. I'm sure, like,
Like something
because it went down.
Borat would wear.
Yeah, well, it went down below his belly button, and I later found out that he was an Audi. Go figure. But this dude would like the yoga class, like the room just wasn't very big, so I'm like, holy crap, you're all gonna be like inhaling his patchouli sweat. It's like the hairiest guy like I've ever seen. He was bald, but he was like really hairy, and he was like I think it was like I think it was like 5'2". So he really stood out, and he would go running in that outfit too, like it through like around the campus. And I'm like, wow, you know what? Be authentic, like stay true to your art. Just take that position and own it, because
Yeah.
It's like, that's all yours. But the patchouli thing was a bit rough. It's like, come on, like, not everyone likes that shit.
Yeah.
Like, but that was, yeah, it was always amusing. Oh, and then we had this awesome guy. He was like, he would do it like, it was almost like 2 or 3 o'clock. I don't know when he would do it. But he would literally walk across campus. And this guy was big. He was like 6'4", big guy. And he would wear these freaking stiletto heels, and they were like thigh high boots. He would wear shorts, like regular, not like the shorts that most guys wear to these days, but they're not like, it wasn't like hot pants. It was just sort of like, kind of like thigh level shorts. But he'd wear these like black, kind of, it was more like knee high boots. But the huge stilettos on them. And he would just like walk across campus, so, just nice and slow, doing his stroll. And I'm like, you know what? You go. You go. Just be your free, let your freak flag fly. I can't say that 3 times fast.
Nice.
Yeah, I want to give him I'd love to talk to him. I think he, he might be a little bit skittish, because I think that he takes a lot of heat, because if you're kind of doing your own tradition, I think that you really have a target, like, just like buttoned to your shirt, because everyone's going to have a comment, and it's like, you know what, this works for me, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, and I think that he kind of mentioned it too. In some respects, I really do like the chaos magic philosophy, which is sort of like, do your own thing. I think he was kind of disturbed by like people evoking stuff out of like the oh god, I can't, like the Cthulhu mythos and stuff. It's, well, yeah, people do weird things, but the Scooby-Doo ones are really amusing. People do like Scooby-Doo God Form.
Beavis and Butthead.
Oy vey.
Yeah. Yeah, I was always sort of a namby-pamby. But, I mean, part of it is because deep down I believe in it. So, I wouldn't,
That's what actors do. Actors do God Forms all the time, and they do Scooby-Doo or something really scary and fearful. I saw this production this one woman did, Porgy and Bess, and this poor woman was like, who was the lead actress, she was crying like it's an emotionally raw show as it is, but she was like crying, like she was like real. I could feel like the waves of emotion like coming from her. I'm like, fucking hell, like that's rough, like that's like some serious God form work right there, where you're just like, they're really in it, and it's not pleasant, and they have to do it every single day. I mean, I don't know what you do with that other than get a good therapist or something.
Wow. That's like a spiritual practice?
No, I'm just talking about actors in general.
Oh, acting. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a good point. There was that whole thing about back in the day when the girl from Poltergeist died, and people were saying, oh well, that's what happens when you invoke those kinds of energies. It's kind of I mean, logically it's post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. But I mean, it's interesting. Like, if
I think you missed a hoke in there.
Like, because of NA proceeds of NB, NA is the cause of NB. But
there you go.
Like all these people that are out there. I mean, I understand when Congress people are saying our prayers are with you and taking money from the NRA. There's a particular
they
context
can totally fight me.
In which, that you can call them out for it. But now it seems like there's people just like willy-nilly posting prayers aren't going to put the fire out. Firemen are, and it's like, really? Why do you have to shout about the ineffectiveness of prayer? I mean, is that what an atheist is? Is someone who believes in the ineffectiveness of prayer and visualization? Because if that's the case,
well, I love how like so I saw this online. I don't know if it's going to happen as a real meme or not, but where people are saying they're wanting to use thoughts and prayers as a form of shade to just sort of say, okay, well. Oh, did you see her new haircut? Oh, our thoughts and prayers are with her. Like that. So you're still kind of using it, but like
just
like
trite. Yeah. It's what all the really dumb religious people want to hear, and so it keeps you in your seat, but doesn't mean anything. Yeah. Not to say religious people are dumb. Just, I mean, the voters. The voters want to make sure you said God and make sure you said prayer. And like people are real quick to point out, he didn't say God, he didn't say prayer. Well, did you see that movie Contact with?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, where she's honest about being an atheist, and so she doesn't get to represent humanity.
Nice.
Hmm.
It's there's this interesting notion that has been kind of going around a little bit, and I wonder if it kind of relates to something that we talked about earlier, which is like why some of the things that you read about with experiences with the old grimoires are perhaps differently manifested today, or that the way they wrote about them, manifests differently now than it did before. And
Right.
Is the belief in psychological so strong that it's kind of created this like weird Jungian shield from like weird manifestations from happening more.
That reminds me of how the original institution of universities and the professors was to act as a shield on behalf of the Catholic Church between people and the knowledge that had become available to them in the Renaissance. It's sort of like that on again, the same pattern but with a different layer of the onion or something.
And he is on. He's ready.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can bring him in here. Let's get to that interview, shall we?
We shall.
Greetings, Frater. Welcome to the Esoterinerd podcast.
Sorry about that.
Oh, it's all good.
No worries.
How's it going?
It's so nice to meet you. Yeah, I read your blog, and I thought I really think that your perspective on things, as well as your experiences with magic in general, are just really really fascinating to me. And I think that it's a really cool story that I think will help a lot of people that just don't have access for whatever reason to having like a local lodge or some sort of order that they feel part of, or they've been through a couple of groups. They're just like, no, this still isn't working for me. So, I'd love to hear if maybe like you can kind of encapsulate some of your background, like starting, like when you first got, interested in magic as a kid. I'd love to hear sort of the quick synopsis of your path.
Well, that means that we're going to go back in time to the early 70s.
Nice. I'll bring in some music, some appropriate music.
Actually, I was really into the Moody Blues at the time.
I'll change it to the Moody Blues now.
When Ed looks like he comes from the 70s. So.
Yeah, I got the mustache and everything.
But at any rate, I was a teenager and pretty much. Well, here's the deal. I had a very strong religious and spiritual sensitivity. I could feel things and sense things that other people didn't. So when I rejected Christianity, which I did at age 13 or 14 thereabouts, it was not for me the pathway of atheism, because I did feel that there was something there.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew it didn't have anything to do with Christianity whatsoever. I was also raised a Protestant, which means that Sunday services were extremely dull, monotonous, and not very changeable, and certainly devoid of all magic.
Well, yeah, there's no evocational things going on in the Protestant church. Now, the Protestants may disagree with me, but yeah, I see what you mean.
Well, the core of a Protestant service is a homiletic type sermon, which is delivered by the pastor, and he can vary that depending upon whatever issue he wants to.
And there's a lot of different verses to draw from.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but Protestants were a little bit more keener on the Old Testament than they were the New. And curiously enough, the church that I was in was built in 1854. Abraham Lincoln had attended services there when his son was at a college that was just outside of Racine at the time. And so, I mean, I spent more time exploring this really old building than I did much of anything else. I can remember one time crawling into the organ during the service. They had a monstrously huge pipe organ that had been originally fabricated in Germany and then was shipped to Racine, Wisconsin.
Fun.
Yeah, but at any rate, I discovered witchcraft, and when it started becoming really popular, I kind of sensed that I was a witch and had seen some popular stuff in some magazines and all of that, and but there really wasn't anything substantive for me to get my hands on until Lady Sheba's Book of Shadows was published by Llewellyn, and Paul Hewson published, I think it was, what was his famous book? It just went out of my head. At any rate, these were books that were practical, that gave me some actual ritual structures to begin to work with and play with. But, and we had an occult bookstore in Milwaukee that I would go up to, and it was called Sanctum Regnum. And Sanctum Regnum was really pretty nifty because it was this black storefront, and you'd go into the door, and it was black on the inside with a red and black shag carpet. And in the back of the store, there was a throne that if you pulled a cord, it would open up and it would lead you into the basement where they had a ritual space, and they also had lots of niches for doing card readings and stuff like that.
How
and
cool.
there were a lot of glass cases. This guy was such a class act that he actually had a beautifully painted white pine box that all of the tarot cards were put in order to protect them. They had tarot card decks that you could look at, but the ones he actually sold were in that box. So, and he had daggers and books on the Kabbalah. I'll never forget one time when I was, you gotta understand, I was like, 16 years old? My eyes were like saucers, and I'm looking at everything in this place, most of which I could not afford. And there was these two hippie dudes who were over by this one bookcase that had all these books on the Kabbalah. And they were whispering to each other and looking at this book. And I walked up to them and I said, "Gee, do you guys know anything about witchcraft and magic?" And they turned around and sort of looked at me sort of disdainfully, as if, a caterpillar had crawled up their nose, and said, "Do you know of the Kabbalah?" And I said, I thought about lying and saying, "Oh yeah, I know lots of stuff," but I didn't. And instead I said, "No, I don't know anything about the Kabbalah." And so they just said, "Oh," and they turned and ignored me as if I didn't exist.
Nice.
And I just felt like I'd been kicked in the nuts, and I was like, "Oh, that hurt," And luckily for me, the woman who ran the counter and all of that, her name was Jeannie, and she was really, a real hot-looking hippie chick, and she kind of massaged my feelings and said, "Oh, don't worry about them," But at any rate, the thing is that there weren't any covens or anything else around for me to really, figure out how to do all this stuff. So it was pure experimentation. A lot of it was imagination, more imagination than any kind of occult facts, because, with my very lean pocketbook, I could not afford books. Books were expensive in those days.
Yep.
They were not cheap. I remember drooling over it was a double. It was the Llewellyn double version. I think it was Llewellyn. Maybe it was somebody else, but it was the double, the 2-volume Golden Dawn set, and it was in a gold covered slip cover that both volumes fit into, and it was like, oh, maybe I think it was like going for maybe about $115 or something like that, which was way beyond my ability to purchase. So I would just kind of look at it and go, oh gosh, I wish I could get that. But instead, I purchased some really cheap pocketbooks that aren't around at all anymore. I wish I would have kept a few of them. They were pretty funny. They were mostly rip-offs from existing occult material that was repackaged into a pocketbook format and sold by people who could get away with plagiarizing stuff off the common domain. So, I mean, they didn't have to pay for it and pretended it was their own stuff. So, but, bits and pieces, I managed to pull everything together. And then finally, I was initiated, met some people and was initiated into an Alexandrian coven of witches. It was the coven from hell.
Oh, yeah, I heard about this one.
Yeah, yes. This is great.
Bill Schneblin and Sharon Schneblin, who had changed their names to Christopher Sin. I don't know. Does that ring a bell to you, that name?
I've heard, that does ring a bell, but I don't know. I couldn't say anything about it.
I'll clue you in. And then Sharon changed her name to Lady Alexandria Pendragon. And at any rate, Bill called himself Christopher Sin because that was the main character in the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh series that Walt Disney put out in the early 60s. And Patrick McGowan played this outward vicar, who was, good to the people and all this stuff, named Christopher Sin. But then, at night he became his alter ego, which was Captain Clegg, and they ran a smuggling operation to confound the soldiers of the king and his revenuers and all of that. And of course they would dress up as scarecrows, and their horses would be painted with a luminescent paint with skeletons until it looked like, scarecrows on a skeleton horse. It was pretty nifty Walt Disney stuff. And so he called himself Christopher Sin. This is the same guy who had a complete Sherlock Holmes outfit and, lots of other personas that he played with. And yeah, he was pretty nutty, but he was pretty smart. And the two covens that he had put together were really good places to learn the occult, because there, for the first time, I had somebody sit down to me and explain to me how the Golden Dawn system magic worked. Not really very well, because unfortunately, Bill had never put the rituals together to get them to function as a whole. And I believe in the 70s that was kind of an issue with a lot of people who were interested in the Golden Dawn material. And in fact, I believe it wasn't until the 80s or 90s that kind of material actually became available to the Golden Dawn community.
Yeah.
How you do, let's say, elemental magic, how you do planetary magic. I believe Aleister Crowley had his take on it in one of his books in the Equinox.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point, because I remember, and it was funny you mentioned like being 16 and stuff. I was exactly that. When I was that age, I was going into my little occult bookstore in this crappy small town in Florida, and I remember seeing like the big giant Golden Dawn book. It wasn't the 2-volume one; it was the big giant one.
The doorstop edition.
The doorstop edition. Yeah, and it was like that price. I'm going, oh my God, like I'll never, how am I going to get money to ever buy this? And I didn't end up buying it. I think my first book was like Llewellyn's blue book. It was a blue book from Llewellyn on witchcraft. So that was like my first occult book. So yeah, I'm sure like a lot of the people that listen have so many similar experiences like that. So it's great to hear. But yeah, the Golden Dawn, even when I would go in to that store and just sit and read, because like the ladies there liked me enough that I could just sit and read for a couple hours and then go home. I had no idea what I was reading. I had no idea how it all worked. So I think that, without kind of having someone saying, oh yeah, they're like this really obtuse thing that they're talking about, this is how it actually works. And this is how people move in the temple and all that stuff. It would be really hard, I think, to piece that all together without seeing it and experiencing it.
Pretty much. I mean, the Golden Dawn system of magic is not intuitively obvious, as I discovered when I tried to pull it all together. The thing is that in witchcraft, there's another layer of complication, and that is in the Alexandrian Gardnerian traditions, as they were practiced back in the 70s, magic was the foremost, let's say, medium in which we functioned and worked. Yes, what we did we did a lot of ceremonies and had ceremonial structures that we worked with in terms of our pagan liturgy, but it was really the magic was the focus. And in the interim of that time period and now, that has really changed quite a bit. It isn't just now the emphasis is much more on the liturgy and upon worshiping the god and the goddess. Back in those days, it was magic. And I was keen on magic. And so witchcraft, unfortunately, is contrary to ceremonial magic in terms of how it functions. In a witchcraft magic circle, a magic circle is set as a boundary between the sacred and the profane. Everything outside of the circle is profane or not sacred. Everything in the circle is sacred. So everything that happens inside the magic circle, you are exposed to. There isn't any goetic circle or anything else that you work with, and there's no need for the lesser pentagram invoking ritual or banishing rituals, because that's handled when you consecrate and set the magic circle and when you banish it. So this kind of immersion means that whatever you do in that magic circle, you are exposed to. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that can protect you, of course, is the god and goddess of your covenstead, who will protect you to the point where it's almost sort of a nanny type situation. Don't touch that. You'll get
Yeah.
Don't keep it so loud. I mean, in popular Wicca, there's no facility for doing goetic evocation, for instance. Because if you did goetic evocation, there would be nothing to protect you from what you have, evoked. Either you would serve your will upon it, or it would serve its will upon you. And so that's kind of that was the perplexing thing. So I first started out working with the energy model of magic, and then graduated from that by using the planetary, getting into planetary forms of magic. But I did not use the hexagram for planetary magic. Instead, I used the septagram, which I find I like a lot more.
Yeah, I remember reading that, and I do want to go back to something that you said, because as I broke out of my own Golden Dawn sort of tradition, and Golden Dawn was great for me for a while, but I needed to do other things, and I'll just leave it at that. But yeah. And so doing I like the perspective of, and I'm sure a lot of people who know a lot about witchcraft probably, I don't know if that's common knowledge what you said or not, but by having that circle that you talked about and having the sacred inside the circle, it forces you to create a relationship with whatever you're working with, because when you do the triangle and the circle, it feels like there's a little bit of danger because there's separation, rather than saying, you know what, we're going to work together here. And by the way, thanks. You don't hear in some of the grimoires that you read, like no one says please or thank you, and I know that like people will be laughing right now, like ha ha ha, you silly foolish mortal, you're saying please and thank you, but why not? Like you're asking you're asking something that's a different being to help you out. Like why not say please and thank you?
Well, in the Caribbean systems of magic, and as I was schooled by my really close, recently departed friend, Ronald Lou McGee, he basically taught me that you have to approach each and every spirit as a unique individual, and you cannot go into that summoning with any kind of preconceived notions of what that spirit is, because your biases will be picked up and amplified in your exchange with that spirit.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the way in which a witchcraft magic circle is set up, there is no mechanism in which to contact spirits other than those that are friendly and disposed towards the god and goddess associated with your coven stead. And the god and goddess of your coven stead make sure that the circle space is safe. It's sacred and safe space. So in order for you to work heavy, hardcore magic in it, you've got to modify that structure. And the easiest and the quickest way that you can do that is by joining the watchtowers, the four cardinal directions, joining them together in the center with a counterclockwise or Widdershins circuit or circumambulation. And if you do that, then you've completely changed the whole equation of the energy in that circle. It has now become a vortex, and it is analogous or similar to the mythic concept of the crossroads. So now you've got a crossroads type situation, and it's there that you can actually connect to all of the various entities of the spirit world in order to do whatever kind of magic you need to do. There's one element that's extremely important if you're going to make that passage, and that is that you have to find out who your personal Godhead is, and to make a powerful connective alignment and relationship with that spirit and assume it. So in other words, it's similar to the Golden Dawn Godhead assumption, except that it's something that you matriculate over time, and it isn't just assuming Horus or Thoth, or it's assuming a Godhead that is your personal definition of that deity. And so, in other words, it doesn't become the Horus of the Egyptians. It's the Horus of Frater Barrabbas, or the Set of Frater Barrabbas, or whatever deity you associate with. Part of your personality imprints it, and part of its personality imprints you, and what you end up with is actually your higher self coming through.
Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, the witches do it in a very sort of preliminary way. It's called drawing down the sun or the moon or the horn god. And so that's kind of the basis. You've got to, once you've established the ability to assume that Godhead in your crossroads magic circle structure, then you can work with the spirits one-on-one, because you are a god. Although not to be confused with Keating's concept of you are a living god.
Well, what's the difference?
Well, it's a difference between everyone is God,
right,
and you alone.
Yeah. Only if you pay $15 a week. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's interesting when it is an interesting distinction, because I hear, when I've done various God form work where I literally effectively become possessed, except for my root chakra, but like everything else is that particular God coming in. But there's the difference between, like, there's still me and there's the God, but it's the God coming through versus, what I hear you saying is more like, that relationship is great, but that's one component of it, and it builds over time as you get to know each other more, and as you start to access your higher self, if you will,
or your genius. And over time, that comes through very powerfully, and it becomes a major component of the magic that you work in this kind of environment. And it allows you to not have to go through all the ceremonial constructs and barriers and boundaries in order to contact a spirit, because you're immersed in the same world as the spirit that you are conjuring. Literally, when I do an evocation, for instance, I'm in the world of that spirit. And you can have a tactile impression with that spirit. Whereas if, traditional Solomonic magic tends to
force the spirit to come here.
Well, or you look at it through a show stone or a scribe.
Yeah, right.
To me, that's almost like I always kind of thought that was like a being, an occult peeping Tom. Oh, you're looking at me. I'm naked. Let me put my robe on. I'll deal with you. These impertinent magicians.
That's awesome.
Always coming around when I'm involved with something or somebody. Not only that, but as this as a conjuring witch, what you end up doing is you start out with the spirits that are around your house, that are inside your house, and your ancestors, and these become things that become a part of, or let's say, a constellation of what it is that you do. Because the concept of polytheism is that you work with a constellation of deities in a relationship to a primary deity, if that primary deity is your focus. And normally that's how your polytheistic temples are usually constructed. If you were to go to India, or if you were to see the ruins of a temple in ancient Egypt, you would notice that it isn't one God, or the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, or like three gods, or in three gods and one God, because it's really one God.
Or seven.
you would find a family. You'd have like Shiva, and then you'd have Shiva's son. And his wife, the Shakti. Shiva's son, I believe, is, not doing too well. Ganesh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ganesh is, and Ganesh got his elephant head because
he got his first head cut off.
He got his first head cut off
by Shiva.
By Shiva, and so Shiva gave him an elephant head, and seemed to work out real well. But at any rate, so there, if you go to an Indian temple, there's a constellation of deities, and the priests, their purpose isn't so much to give you sermons and homiletics or to coach you. What people who go there to worship pretty much worship as they see fit within certain parameters. What that priest is supposed to do is to keep the presence of the deity, a Toho presence of all of those deities, alive in that temple 24/7. And so the statues in the shrine are taken care of as if they were real people. They're dressed and given breakfast in the morning and cleaned, and they have curtains over the shrine so that at nighttime when they put them to bed, that they have a peaceful rest, and they have this entire day, and the Egyptians had an entire day and night of activity that would happen around the clock to keep the presence of the deity in that temple. And so a witch conjurer ends up doing the same thing with a shrine. In addition to having a temple, permanent temple space, the witch conjurer also has a shrine, and foremost in that shrine is your representation of your personal godhead and higher self, and then the constellation of other entities that are associated with you, other gods or goddesses that are of particular importance to you that you've invoked for various reasons. Spirits that you've run into, like there might be a giant tree outside your house that has an entire hive of spirits in it.
Right.
All of these things become part of a network, a constellation of which you are the core and the center of. And it's through that you evoke and contact goetic spirits or whatever you wish in the three worlds of the spirit world. And of course, the three levels of the spirit world are pretty much the same as the three levels of us living on Earth. And that is what is in the sky, what is on the land, and what is below the land. And that's a very shamanistic perspective of what the spirit world is like. And in my book, which will be coming out in February, Spirit Conjuring for Witches, which is published by Llewellyn, I kind of really go into that in detail in terms of this is the eschatology that you use. And in order to classify the spirits and get an idea, a roadmap, as you were, of what this territory is like so that you can move around and contact and work with the spirits within it.
So, Frater, like one of the things I was really interested to hear, because I love this perspective, and I'm curious, like, as you've kind of gone along and you've kind of had to forge some of your own pathways, but you also have like really taken a study of, okay, now that I have access to what a lot of the earlier knowledge was, are there things that you've kind of uniquely kept in your tradition that are different, and have you kind of gotten any sort of negativity, sort of like, well, that's not the way it should be this way? It's like, well, yeah, but practically my way works, so what do you want?
Well, here's the problem. When I started out, as I gave you the story of my life, I didn't have a lot of materials, and I had a boundless imagination. So I created a system of magic that was mostly fancy with a little bit of occult stuff in it. And as time went on, it matured. But this system that I've been working with since I was a wee, lad is still around, and it's still functioning. I've built upon it. And so instead of, dumping whatever it is that I've worked with for all these years, I have instead built up and matriculated the system of magic to have many different dimensions to it and lots of different capabilities. As I said, I work mostly with the energy model starting out, but later on I got into the spirit model and the psychology model and the information model, and managed to integrate all of these into the system of magic that I'm working. So, I mean, that's the problem. When I come across something that is a really good idea, if I find that it fits with what I'm doing and working, I will appropriate it. I will cite my sources. This is where I got this idea from, down to the page number if I have to.
By the way, I think, and that was one of the other things I really wanted to touch on, because I love that perspective of just saying, oh, hey, you're doing something and that works. It's kind of like, you have your own box of crayons and you see someone else at the, at the kindergarten table, and you're kind of like, oh, cool, can I borrow that red? Because I don't have red in my crayon box. And it's like, yeah, everyone should have all the colors they frickin' want to make their picture. Like, yeah. Who cares? It's not like, oh, no, I can only have blue and green.
Like, no, that's Buddhism. You're a Christian. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, though. There are limits to what you can appropriate.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And if you want a real lesson on what those boundaries are, just read.
Start doing it. Oh.
Well, look at Michael Bertaux's book, The Gnostic Voodooan Workbook. That'll give you an idea of how you can pair things together that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, there are things that are really contrary. I mean, you can't. There are certain archetypes and gods and spirits that just don't they're not going to work well together in the same space.
Or they will be absolutely meaningless. And some of the chaos magicians that I've run across...
Sorry. I got this visual, you saying that, where there are these two entities, they kind of look at each other and sort of shrug. Like, oh.
Well, actually, I look at it more like a Frankenstein monster. You've given him two penises and all of that. And he's kind of, and it's sort of, you can assemble a bunch of pieces together and hit it with, high voltage from a thunderbolt. I mean, a lightning bolt. Yeah. But is it really going to function? Is it really going to work? And is it really going to work very well?
Right. It's like those atoms that can only exist for a fraction of a second or something like that. Maybe you can make a hybrid for not for very long. Yeah.
One of the things I've discovered is when people construct rituals, is they tend to make the rituals more and more elaborate and complex. And after a period of time, they collapse on their own weight. A good example of that is David Griffin's book, The Ritual Magic Manual.
The 666-page one?
Yeah. I mean, what he did is he very properly put all the pieces together. But you don't need to do all of those banishments in a single ritual, and it destroys the continuity of what it is that you're trying to do. So here's somebody who put together the pieces, but who did not
synthesize.
Exactly. When you start working something, it becomes more efficient. You can always tell a ritual that hasn't really been worked because it has a lot of extraneous pieces to it that make you go, huh? What's this in here for? Okay, why are we doing this again? When you start doing that, when you're performing a ritual in your mind, then you know that the next time you sit down to rework that ritual, you're going to get rid of that piece of work or that ritual construct because it's not relevant, or it's inefficient, or it's a distraction. And over time, what you will do is you'll have something that will be honed down to the efficient minimum that you need in order to do things. And anybody who develops their own system of magic goes through this. Now, the purists who go, to the grimoires and actually go back to the original Latin or Greek or Hebrew, and who do everything exactly by the book. And if you don't, then you have to stop what you're doing and fumigate and wait 3 months and then start all over again. I can't even begin to understand that kind of approach. And anybody that I know who's a functioning magician does not work magic that way at all. I mean,
well, yeah, that's like that's just masturbatory. Like, let's get in robes and wave our wands around and and that's fun. It's fun. I like doing it too. But if you do it a lot, then you're you get to those places where you're just like, oh my God, I've spent so much energy and drawing all these banishing circles and doing all this stuff. And now I've only got 15 minutes to do the real stuff that I'm here to do. It becomes ridiculous.
Yeah. There's a way of melding these things down so that they come down, so that they crystallize into an efficient system in which you work magic. In a very direct sort of way. I mean, even I am guilty of this. Some of the ritual structures that I've written are massive. And, I've written ritual processes that take 3 days to do. But lucky for me, I have a construct called the vortex as an energy structure. And the vortex is, it's like a black hole. And I actually kind of the concept of a black hole vortex I got from Michael Bertot. Okay, so I mean, just so I'll cite my sources. But he had a different way of perceiving that. But it's a spiral energy that goes counterclockwise and down into the center of the circle and then below the floor. So it's like a whirlpool. And when you establish that on your 4 watchtowers with the watchtowers crossed as a crossroads, it creates a stable structure that contains everything inside of it, so that you can work layers of magic within that structure. And then all you have to do is use what is known as a sealing spiral, and you can seal that vortex to exactly where it is that you left it at that level of intensity. And the next day or the next week or whenever you come back and you consecrate the circle and set it, and then you do unsealing spirals to those points in the circle. And lo and behold, what you put there is there active at the same level of intensity, and then you can add to it more layers.
Very cool. So I've got a question for you. So we had actually know one of the guys who did this ritual, but there's a rather famous story. I think it's word of mouth famous. I don't think it's famous, but it was the IoT, the Illuminates of Thanatos. I think it's the IoT. They're the Chaos Magic Order, which I think an order of chaos magicians by nature is kind of a funny idea. But in any case, they were together, and they were in London, or no, they were in the UK somewhere, and they did one of their first rituals and created like a localized tornado. And I had heard from another teacher that, well, that's just an example of, a ritual gone horribly wrong, because you shouldn't see this kind of physical manifestation. What are your thoughts on that? Like, was it all in good fun and they achieved their result, or was it just a big mistake?
Well, the first and most important premise in chaos magic and the psychology model of magic is what I refer to as the as if. As if. So there's some synchronicity there. They did a ritual, and they perceived and experienced what appeared to be a tornado. And did they cause that tornado to occur? Well, from a magician's standpoint, cause and effect are sort of not particularly relevant questions to ask, because what you're really dealing with here is the subjective experience of magic.
Right.
And the subjective experience of magic does not, it goes counter to the intuition of cause and effect. And in many cases, when you're working magic, you can have experiences with time sliding, with the effect occurring before you actually perform the rite, and all sorts of other really bizarre, strange phenomena that would represent the fact that when you properly work magic, that there is what I call kind of a causality collapse. And a vortex is very much a causality collapse, because when you've established one, your sense of time just goes completely awry. You can do a working in that vortex, and it can seem as if, it took you hours to do it, and you get out of it and only, like 40 minutes have passed. Or just the opposite. It seems like, this is, just normal time for me and all that. And you get out and you find out that hours have gone by. So, I mean, it's one of those really strange things. But the thing you've got to watch out is for what I refer to as magicians' tales of power. And if you get a bunch of old, fogey magicians together, they will tell you all of the really bizarre and crazy stuff that they've experienced, some of which was under the influence of some substance, perhaps.
Some more than others.
Some more than others. Certainly, they were inspired to perceive reality in a certain way. And this can be objectified within a group of people. One of the amazing things about working magic in a group is that you can have people who all see the same phenomena at the same time. Which brings me to one of the arch enemies of all magicians, and that is a guy named Lizinski. Lizwinski, I think his name was.
Yeah,
I think you mentioned that he wrote a book about chaos magic?
No, he wrote a book about magical evocation.
Okay.
In which he basically stated that all modern magic is crap. And that if you really, really want to work magic, you will take one of the old grimoires, older the better, and you will take that and you will religiously research and perform it exactly as it states in that grimoire, and then, only then, will you have real physical phenomena, brimstone, fire, demons, and there's even a big fiery demon on the cover of the book.
That's hilarious.
His name is Joseph Lizinski. And actually, I've heard that, and it's PhD, and actually heard that there's no such person, really. It was a pen name. But at any rate, so he basically pushed this whole methodology, and in many ways he was instrumental in really pushing people towards using the grims, or using the grimoires, and the grimoire tradition, where you only use the grimoires, and all the modern stuff, especially the stuff from the Golden Dawn, is a bunch of crap. And chaos magic is even more a bunch of crap. And that the old masters knew how to work magic, and we've lost that art. We're corrupted. And I find that sort of mindset to be intolerably arrogant and incredibly stupid. Magic.
Sorry, Damien. If you still want that interview, talk to me. Talk to me. We don't have to talk about the other stuff, but you can defend your whole grimoire thing. Anyway, sorry. Go back to what you were saying.
But if you talk to the people who really are working with the Grims, they're adaptive. They work things out. They invent some things, other things they take from their traditions, because we don't have the complete context of what was practiced in Europe at that particular time, nor do we want to, because the people who practiced the grimoire tradition in the late Middle Ages and the early Renaissance were very pious Christians. We are not pious Christians. We have no concept of the kind of piety that they exhibited. It's a lost thing. Hey, did you see the movie The Witch?
Nope.
Oh, you did? You haven't? Oh, you should really
Sorry.
go. Oh, that's okay. Go borrow it. Besides, you get a chance to meet Black Phillip. Black Phillip is a goat.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's I saw that on one of your posts. So yeah.
Yeah, it's because Jake and I are having a conversation in which he's discovered linkages between goetic demons of various different traditions all over the place. And one particular name he's discovered is to be found quite a bit, and that reduces down to the Hebrew demon name known as Azazel, which would be Ayin, Zain, Aleph, Zain, Lamed. 5 letters. Yes, I took Hebrew for 3 semesters. It helped a little. But
all
anyway,
I know is like the letters and the correspondences and like I could do a little bit of gematria and that's it.
Well, actually, the coolest thing you can do for gematria is to take the Hebrew letters and to lay out the trump cards in the tarot, and then to look at it as if it were a reading, and to read it, and you'll find that you'll really understand what those different angelic names are much better by doing that than monkeying around with gematria.
Yeah.
Because in order to make go ahead.
I love fortune cookie gematria, where you actually you get your fortune cookie and you look at the
numbers.
Yeah, and I do the Hebrew letters with them. I'm like, oh, okay, so this one's the Tower card, and then this one's death, and I think I'm going to stop reading this fortune cookie now. This one's like Nine of Swords.
That's really brilliant. But you see, that's the kind of creativity that, in my opinion, has to be evident if you are actually really working magic, or if you're doing any kind of spirituality. If you approach magic, occultism, or spirituality in a rote sort of fashion, without any curiosity or any kind of opening or desire for seeking some kind of insight, you're wasting your time. That's your layman approaches religion that way. They go to Sunday because their neighbors see them in church and therefore know that they're good people, and yada yada. And if your house blows down, or if your wife dies, or something terrible happens to you, then you've got a community that can make you feel better about what it is that you're having to deal with. But if you were a true seeker, that kind of religious engagement is much too weak and much too meaningless for you. You want something much more intense. So anybody who's working magic ends up having to put together their own system of magic, unless there are a few traditions where you can actually learn goetic evocation from the hands of a master. Like for instance, if you were initiated into Palo Mayombe. Palo Mayombe actually has individuals within it who work with the goetic demons. But,
just real quick for those of us who don't already know, Palo Mayombe, what is that?
It is a Brazilian Caribbean magical religious system.
Is it commonly known as voodoo?
No.
Okay, so it's a different one.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. What is that? It has a similar origin, though, I imagine. Are there?
It's from a different part of.
Okay. I think my buddy Cast was trying to tell me about this the other day, but
Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt. So you were saying that some people within that system work with goetic spirits.
Yes, conjure goetic spirits using analogous seals to the spirits that are used in the Grimm tradition. And basically, according to what I've been chatting up with Jake, the same thing should be true also with those who are involved in Wicca or British traditional witchcraft. They should also have a facility for conjuring spirits, and also, if required, to work with goetic demons. Now, I suppose you're asking yourself, why would anyone bother to deal with a goetic demon? What's the point? There's always these horrific tales like, oh yeah, somebody invoked a demon and asked for a chunk of money and their house burned down, and they got the chunk of money, but their house burned down. And you might know who I'm referring to, but the thing is that goetic demons, like other powerful spirits that are closely associated with the earth, can be more adaptive to working with you to achieve a material end than angels or celestial spirits or various types of entities that are far removed from humanity. But so witchcraft should have a natural proclivity towards those kinds of spirits, be they to be considered fairies, and I don't mean the sweet, cute fairies.
The ones that bite in the David Bowie movie.
The one, well, no, the ones that will,
I hate bitey fairies.
Yeah. That movie Labyrinth, where the fairy bit her finger and she says, "It bit me," and then Hoggle says, "Of course it bit you. It's a fairy."
Real fairy would have taken the arm off or something. I mean, one of the powerful fairies is or earth spirit is a puka. And, there's a really interesting movie all about the puka called Harvey. And Harvey can't be seen, but he's a
the big rabbit.
He's a 9-foot rabbit.
Yeah.
Any rate, Earth spirits are, especially when you get under the earth, and there's a whole batch of fairies that live under the earth because, they have things like leprechauns hoarding gold and gems and stuff like that. These are the treasures of the earth. If you want to access the treasures of the earth, you don't go to God or the angels. You go to the demons or the leprechauns or the earth spirits who
you do.
have provenance over these worldly goods.
Right.
And this goes all the way back to, antiquity, as a matter of fact. Although there is no continuous line between antiquity and here as far as any practices or beliefs or anything. I don't care what anybody says. And even witchcraft is a modern invention.
Oh, like a lineage? Someone says, my great-great-grandmother was the first witch.
Yeah. And I've heard people sort of say, particularly from the UK, they're like, oh, well, I've got lineage. Or this one guy did that I met in San Francisco was like, oh, no, I've got lineage back to the Druids. And I got to tell you, his was like the weirdest spiritual practice I've ever encountered. It was disturbing in a lot of ways, but I won't go into that.
He probably made it up.
Could have. I wouldn't.
I'm sure of it. He made it up. But he told everybody.
And that's okay. It's okay. I think it's okay to make stuff up. Just like say, you know what? I've made this up.
Yeah.
It works for me. Let's see how it. Let's do something.
That's why I've transitioned into authoring sci-fi rather than telling people that this is the nature of the universe that you're looking at in the form of my interpretation of the Tree of Life that someone in the 1500s drew. Yeah, exactly.
Do you like sci-fi from the 50s and 60s?
Well, I like the Bible. That's some old sci-fi. I'm into the recent stuff. There's Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained. I highly recommend. It's recent, 10 years ago, but it's very kind of keyed into more recent, questions. I have two sci-fi podcasts. One called The Coffee House and Interdimensional Odyssey, and the other called New World Empire. That deal with popping in and out of different dimensions and stuff like that.
I will say, I will say this, Ed. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say Ed.
Oh, no, Ed's fine. I got over that. I used to be very. I don't know. I was possessed by a former life as a British aristocrat. I apologize for that.
No worries.
Ed is perfectly acceptable. Yeah.
But there are some people, particularly I find them in engineering, who cannot visualize anything. But for those people that kind of have trouble, I love sci-fi and recommending sci-fi to them because it really helps. It's like, well, how do you imagine this world that doesn't exist in any kind of form for you? And
CGI.
And it really helps. Yep.
Yeah, totally. Well, sorry. What were you saying?
I like the science fiction from the 50s and 60s. Like,
what are some of your favorites?
Like H. Beam Piper.
I don't know that one.
Space pirates, man.
Cool. Okay, that's a recommendation I'll definitely take you up on.
Yeah.
You can get his entire works. I mean, he committed suicide just before he became popular and famous.
Wow, like Van Gogh. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's but he came up with a whole concept of the what was referred to as the Sword Worlds, which was the galactic empire that completely collapsed, and so what you had was various worlds at lower stages of evolutionary or technological development, and you had the Shield worlds who were had descended to a kind of feudalism, but with space weapons and space ships. But really well writ stuff. Those guys could really write.
Nice.
And of course, Ray Bradbury is a favorite of mine. His book "Something Wicked This Way Comes" is lyrical from beginning to end. It just blows me away how this guy was able to write.
I really enjoyed Space Cadets. I like that period before we had started sending Voyager missions up and all that, where they were still imagining there was life on Venus. So
yeah.
in Space Cadets, you have the natural the matriarchal society of the aliens that live on Venus. This is all really interesting, and they really explored kind of. There was a kid who grew up on one of the small outer planets, or what's one of the small moons of Jupiter, and so he had special dispensation to eat steak right before a big training because he had to, he's just used to different gravity and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun.
Actually, prize fighters do eat steak before they fight. Did you know that?
I didn't.
Yeah, it's a steak meal is usually what a lot of these prize fighters get, including those who are just starting out. It's the red meat, At any rate, makes you aggressive and sort of beastie-like.
Yeah.
But at any rate, that was sort of a little side trip there. Because I was involved with David, because I was involved with Bill Schnabelin and Coven from Hell and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
There is an aspect of me that still is a sucker for somebody coming up to me and saying that they have the answer. And that they are connected to the secret chiefs, and there's this long lineage that and I can get fooled by that. You would think that I would be smart enough not to get suckered into that stuff, but unfortunately I do. And my experience with David Griffin is very much part and parcel to that. Most of the people who are on Facebook and in other places have never met him physically. And so it's really easy to despise somebody and to be rude and crass on Facebook and on the internet with people that you've never physically met. Whereas if you met him in the bar, you probably wouldn't say half the shit that people say, because you'd end up with a broken jaw or a bloody nose or something. I mean, it'd be a big fist fight. And people tend to be more polite unless they're interested
in person. Yeah.
But David Griffin was extremely charming, so much so that he can seduce people very, very rapidly and readily. I think it goes with his personality profile and all that. And he does have quite a bit of knowledge. I tested him on that, and he did for a while have.
Bless you.
Oh, I thought you were like, oh, don't tell me that. It's a secret. He did have a connection with the quote-unquote secret chiefs, who really aren't all that secret and who aren't that amazing either. I mean, they're just a bunch of magician-type masons practicing in Europe, and who are extremely arrogant and full of themselves. And who do not like people who are self-made men, because they weren't. You have to kowtow and you have to, go through the ropes, as it were, as in good Mason sort of standing.
Right.
But, so the things that he brought, that he, brought forward and all that, it was real. And so people are like, he's full of baloney. Yeah, not really. The problem is that like any kind of pseudo cult, he had a dark side, and his dark side was really very dark and really very negative. And
I always kind of thought of we call them Voldemort and Gargamel, but I thought of them as being kind of two birds of a feather. But everything you're saying just sounds so damn familiar that it's like, yeah, there was some real shit going on there, but the creepy, insidious, mind fucking, not to mention growling and swearing and being an asshole, just yeah. I mean, I don't know. They're probably different kinds of monsters, but
yeah. Although here's the thing, and you're gonna hate me for this.
Oh,
but
no,
I think I think because of that, there's kind of like this weird advantage into being in that kind of cult, because there are skills that I developed that I don't think, it's kind of
you
like
wouldn't have gotten anywhere else.
Yeah. So I did Iron Man like 2012, and I wouldn't have possibly done that had it not been for a coach who knew me really well and could push me beyond my limits.
Yeah.
And so it's, in a way, it's kind of like this S&M kind of thing, or BDSM or whatever,
Right?
Because it's like you have either one of them. It doesn't matter whether it's Gargamel or Voldemort or some random cult leader or whoever. It doesn't matter.
Your local,
but they can,
yeah.
they can push you to limits that you didn't know that you had. But they, like, because everyone knows, like, if you've been around long enough, you know, like, okay, like, you can go further, you can take it even further. And I remember I did this 6-hour vigil, and it was like really, really cool, and it involved like constantly like doing steady walking and chanting, and basically I was doing a mantra for 6 hours, and I had never done it, but I wouldn't have done it had it not been for kind of that prodding, and it helped me realize, oh yeah, like I can push beyond these limits, and I can take it even further. So like you talk about the 3-day ritual, Frater, but I like that's inconceivable to someone sort of starting out who hasn't done like maybe, okay, well, so now you're going to do a 6-hour thing, and you're going to do like you're not going to do that every week, but you're going to do a daily practice, and then maybe once a month, well, now do something like a 10-hour thing or whatever the case is, but you can keep pushing and keep breaking beyond barriers. And that's what the cult leaders kind of give you. But I don't recommend it. I think figuring out like how to move beyond your boundaries without a cult leader is a really healthy thing to do.
Yeah, that's what this podcast is all about. Yeah.
Well, the thing, what you are describing though is something that you can take ownership for and work yourself. And it's called an ordeal, a magical ordeal. And what it does is it forces and triggers an internal form of psychological transformation. And the magical order that me and my friends put together back in the 80s had, what it did is it taught you magic, and then you would go up to a certain point where you'd be able to assemble things together, and then you would be forced into doing an ordeal. And then you'd learn the next set of magical technologies and all that, and then it would lead to another ordeal. And so that each initiation or grade had associated with it an ordeal that you had to perform either by yourself or you could involve other people, but you had to facilitate it for yourself. And what I've discovered is if you take that approach, you can self-initiate yourself all the way up to the highest level.
Yep. And then realize that that's at that highest level that you're still here.
Gone anywhere.
Well, I don't.
The ruby slippers were with you the whole time, Dorothy.
The slippers were with you the whole time.
Well, that's the cycle of the hero or heroine in this case, where you discover that where you ended is where you started. It brings the end and the beginning together into one.
Yeah. Like in the
that's
symbolism of the star card, where it's Eden restored after the fall and the redemption, and instead of a serpent in the tree, it's Thoth as the ibis and all that.
If you're really into the tarot, I would recommend that you read The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
That's a great book.
That's basic.
But
Wiccan.
There's 22 stages in the cycle of the hero. If you add together the 17 stages the hero goes through, and then the 5 stages the cosmogonic cycle.
Interesting.
In ancient Egypt, the cycle of Ra, the sun god, when he goes into the underworld and into the Anduat, is that cosmogonic cycle. And what they tried to do is the pharaoh tried to encapsulate that and capture that in his own death process, so that he would be able to conquer death and rise up with the sun in the morning when the sun rose from the underworld. And so, I mean, that's kind of where that cycle of initiation stems from. It's that transformative process, along with the cosmogonic vision of the renewal of the world by knowing the world in its 5 stages. You know, the creation, the golden age, the age of death, and then dissolution. And of course, how those four things cycle around the fifth, which is the core of the world, or the belly of the whale, or the entire process of itself, which is the cosmos. So, I mean, if you look at those elements, the 17 stages and the 5 stages, the 17 stages of the hero cycle, and the 5 stages, the cosmic gonic cycle, what you have then are the 22 trumps of the tarot cards.
Very interesting. Real quick before we wrap up, because we're kind of running out of time here.
Okay.
I one of the interviewees from a few episodes ago, Solis, wanted me to mention, or wanted me to see if I could get you to talk a little bit about the really bizarre ritual in the Coven from Hell.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good.
There were so many of them.
The one with the furious blowjob.
The one with the what?
Maybe she misread it. The priest getting, as she said, mad head at one point after he had invoked Satan into himself.
Oh, yes. And Sharon pissed into a bowl, and that was used to asperge the temple with.
Wow.
Ew.
And all present?
And yeah.
Sorry, I'm a Libran. That doesn't fly with me. Like, we don't like bad smells and things.
Well, yeah, but
doesn't always smell bad.
You know that urine actually is sterile when it comes out first.
Right.
I know, but they should have like subtitled it. They should have subtitled the day like ritual 7. You're in for a treat.
Well, this was supposed to be a Luciferian satanic mass.
Nice.
And when Christopher had Lucifer, Satan, drawn down on him, he was straddled across this altar naked, and Alexandria poured honey on his genitals with bee pollen and began to blow him while we were all in these positions of adoration. And
all right.
What in the
yeah, I'm sorry, I can't hold it any longer.
This really happened.
I
will never forget it. I cannot bleach it out of my mind.
Well, it's tough because, like, when you're in that ritual space, you're kind of like, you like, okay, I need to be here, but like, what the fuck? Like, really? Okay, like, but like, you got to be there, like, present. So,
you really should do a Google search on Bill Schneebelen.
Okay.
I mean, this is a guy who's gone out there. What happened is he became a fundamentalist preacher and had his books published by Chick Publications, and one of them was Wicca, Satan's Little White Lie. At any rate, he also talks about how he was a vampire, and I was there in those days. I saw what he went through, he was. You got, at some point, your creative, magical occult work can become so out of bounds that there's nothing to distinguish it from being insane.
Well, but I think that's why we have, like, I think that's the experience of being human, that we have other humans around to kind of, like, we have this ego, which the purpose, I believe, is just to interface with other humans in kind of a normal way. And one of the advantages of that ego is for other people to say, dude, what you're doing is really fucked up.
Yeah.
And you got to, like, bring it down a notch. But, like, if you're the leader, then no one's going to say that, particularly if you've got this weird ass organization. Right, exactly.
Especially if you're the leader of a cult. But that's why I believe in peer review. And trust me, I get a fair amount of that. I get shot down a lot. The sci-fi author that I was thinking about was Dan Simmons, I think his name is? Hyperion. That's one of my favorite sci-fi books of all time.
Okay.
I think that what he wrote, the series of books that he wrote were absolute literary masterpieces. And just because they're sci-fi, they never really quite got the accolade that they deserved.
Right.
But anyway, that's just the way my mind works. But yeah, that stuff with Bill Schnabel, that really happened. I really saw that. It was, and that wasn't even the nuttiest thing that I've ever seen. I mean,
okay.
What was the
Wait. Oh, yeah. Yes, we're going there. We are going there.
So
another nutty. I mean, we'll tell you ours. We'll show you ours if you show us yours.
Oh man, I don't know.
It's a safe space. No judgment.
We were a coven of witches. We were practicing Golden Dawn and Thelemic magic. And for some reason, Bill decided that he wanted to go Catholic. And
okay, so was this before or after Lucifer?
This is before.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
He decided that he wanted to add the Catholic lineage, mainly to appropriate all of its magic, and also because he had written to and gotten in touch with and then started visiting Michael Berteau in Chicago. We were in Milwaukee and Berteau was in Chicago. And so at any rate, here I'm part of this hardcore witch coven, and I'm asked, because I play flute really quite well, to accompany this group of people down to a small, tiny town in I don't know, in middle of Illinois, where Bill is going to be ordained by one of his friends as a Catholic priest, an old Catholic priest. And so we go down there, and, I had to learn this piece of music to play and all of this other stuff, and Sharon sang, with the organ and all that. And it was a Catholic ordination ritual in Latin. And so, a lot of pressure was put on me. And so I began to pick this stuff up. And for several months, I actually functioned by saying Mass and was involved in a small chapel, a Franciscan chapel in town, even though I was really a witch practicing magic, but none of the congregation people knew that. And Bill ultimately got his wish and became a bishop. And I got ordained as well, but by that time it was completely within a magical context. But here's the rather dishy women in our coven and all that, dressed up as nuns. and so it was bizarre. Then there was another.
That's fantastic.
Alexandria one of Alexandria's really attractive aspects of her physically was her incredibly long hair. She had hair almost down to her butt. And for some reason, towards the end, before I quit, the magic was getting to be so crazy. Bill really got into this whole vampire trip, and he put together the cult of the Nosferatu. And then he also wrote a mass of Superman, where, based on the Superman movie.
I thought I was the first one to do that.
He actually had made the sign of the S in the air instead of the cross, and all of this stuff.
And
Exactly. She shaved her head and carved a cross on her forehead. And I was just like, man, it's getting strange around here, I mean, why am I still here? But I was sucked in. It was like Camelot going to hell. And I've written a 4-parter on my blog article. You can go look up Bill Schnabel, and I've got a bunch of stuff on him, and or also known as William Schnabel. And he just was. And you know, on the internet you can find him too, where he claims to be a vampire and he claims to have contacted. He says that UFO aliens are really demons, and that Harry Potter, you know, leads you to Satanism. And,
Yay, good, because I love Harry Potter.
And it, you know, he's this angry Santa Claus with this long white beard, and you know. And he's just a nasty old shit, basically. But he did one thing. He stepped on one set of. Well, he even went out there and wrote this book on the Masons and talked about how they're really inspired by the devil and all of this stuff. And
nice,
which pissed off the Masons. You can bet, because I'd gotten Bill into the Masons through my father, who was a member. You know. I was the dumbass who actually got him into the Masons. You know, how embarrassing. But he wrote this nasty booklet and took on the Mormon Church, and it's called Joseph Smith and the Temple of Doom. You can still find variations of it out on the internet, even though the Mormon Church went out of their way to expunge it. He had to go to Europe because Chick publications were sued heavily by the Mormon Church, which has a real lot of money, and they were very unhappy with the whole thing, and it disappeared, except that ghosts of it are still online. But he basically said that the Mormon Church, that their central deity was Lucifer, i.e. the devil. And they were not pleased. And unlike the other organizations who just sort of, you know, they took him seriously and they took him to task. And then in the internet, there was all this stuff about him and what he had been into. And all these people are like saying, he couldn't have belonged to all those organizations. And I'm saying, actually, he did. He was about, you know, he was about, you know, a quarter of an inch thick and about 10 miles wide. He covered everything in the occult that you could have covered in 16 years.
Okay, so we promised that if you showed us yours, we'd show you ours. So mine, I'm going to give you a story.
Okay.
So this is a Golden Dawn tradition.
Yeah.
And in the Golden Dawn tradition, as Hierophant, you can actually scepter someone up a couple grades.
Yeah.
If you like. So people were high in this particular temple. I think they would deny that they were high, but I think they were high. And someone unnamed donned like the Hierophant regalia and took the Hierophant scepter and sceptered the temple cat into the grate of fire. So this mean-ass cat that was already kind of cranky got like 1,000 times worse.
That's pretty funny.
I thought that was the most hysterical thing in the world. Poor kitty.
Oh.
No. Good kitty. Nice kitty.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
I mean,
yeah.
The Golden Dawn really needs an enema.
Needs an enema. The Golden Dawn needs an enema.
Because I can tell some stories, but if they get carried around, I would probably get some blowback for it. But if I had to join an organization, I think I would test out my local body of the OTO, because therein you probably will find some decent magicians.
Yeah, they seem nice. I mean, you know.
And sane.
Yeah, for the most
Sometimes. Depends on the group.
It's not 100%. There's a lot of different organizations. So just
exactly.
like the Catholic Church.
All the lodges are totally different. They really are, that I found.
Yeah.
The one up here in Minneapolis is actually really quite good. And maybe someday you guys should come up here and visit, because we have a very special person who comes and gives talks to us every now and then, and that's Joseph Peterson. The guy who's published a number of grimoire translations and has the esotericarchives.com, which has a lot of the original manuscripts in their original language out there. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we could probably go on and talk for hours and hours.
Yeah, we're gonna have to wrap it up, unfortunately, because I got a couple
Yeah.
things I got to take care of. But thank you so much for joining us on the Esoterinerd
Yeah,
podcast
thanks
today.
so much. I was really looking forward to this.
Yeah, and we can continue to have further conversations if you wish in the future, and I hope this satisfies the person who wanted to know if what I experienced in that situation was real. I mean, I'd have to, if you look over my Bill Schnebelin, William Schnebelin stuff on my blog, you'll find all of the dirt. It's
But
all.
wait. We have to do one last plug for your book. So your book is coming out in February. It's from Llewellyn, and it's called
Spirit Conjuring for Witches.
Awesome. Buy it.
Sounds good.
It'll probably be not terribly or particularly expensive, but I've done a heck of a job editing it myself, and Llewellyn does a really good job of editing and art and putting diagram artwork in it. I also have a book on the Kabbalah if you're interested in that, and that was the Magical Kabbalah for Beginners, although it's a book that's written for many different levels. And in fact, I even talk a bit about the Qlīfot in it as well. Not what you'd expect for a book for beginners, but I wanted to satisfy as many people on many different levels as possible. And that's also by Llewellyn.
Sounds
Great.
good to me.
Thanks so much for your time.
Sure.
All right. Have a good rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Frater Barrabbas, for being our guest on the Esoterinerd podcast tonight. Thank you, Joe Shantz, for being my co-host. Thank you to Susumu Ueda and his father and the other monks at Jofukuin Temple on Mount Koyasan for the music you're hearing right now. And thank you to identical twins Camille and Kennerly for the harp Game of Thrones transitions into and out of the interviews. Thank you, Frater IT, for reciting the Fama in German for the Esoterinerd podcast. Thank you to Jean-Michel Jarre, or Jarre, for the album Equinox, which I used in the background this time for the Secret of the Golden Flower segment. Thank you again to Akito Nakatsuka for composing the theme to The Adventures of Link. That was an orchestral rendition of when he goes into the towns, that music. Most importantly, thank you to you, the Esoterinerd, listening to this podcast. Until next time. Shalom.